Welcome back again. You're still watching us here on The Daily Debate. I'm very delighted to have joining me in the studio this evening Dr. Ibrahim Hegazy, Professor of Business Administration. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Ibrahim.
It's my pleasure.
As we've seen in the report, to diversify the sources of the financial development plans and programs in Egypt, and that definitely had changed the face of Egypt and the characteristics of its economy for the past 6 years. So if we want to start by talking about how do you see the Egyptian economy today, looking back at all the achievements that have been done, recapped during the past couple of years? Are we standing in the right place that we should be today?
Thank you, first of all, to invite me to come back again to the Daily Debate. It's always a pleasure to be also with you. Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you.
And I just would like to tell you that for the first time, actually, in Egypt economic planning, to find that we have a long-term plan, which is the 2030 Sustainable Development Plan. And it has a very clear-cut objectives and targets to achieve, whether it is quality of life, sustainability, governance, peace, prosperity, leadership in terms of regional leadership also, and the well-being of human Egyptian life. So if we have this, and this is a long term, as I mentioned, it's 2030, so we have medium to short-term plans that actually lead up to the end, achieving the fulfillment of the 8 objectives of the Sustainable Development. So regardless of what happened during 2020, because this is all over the globe.
Everything slowed down and stallmated because of the virus.
We cannot judge Egypt and the economy of Egypt, but definitely with I think all the reports coming from the World Bank or the IMF, we did a wonderful job to sustain, and that's why the talks were usually in the reports about the agility and the flexibility of the Egyptian economy, along, of course, with the recommendation made by the President himself, as well as the government, as headed by Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli. So I think we are in the right track most of the time that we read the reports from the World Bank, from IMF, JP Morgan, Fitch, all of the good credential reports that talks about economies. I think Egypt is in the right track. In fact, when you look at the report regarding the circular economy, Egypt ranked number 6 in terms of the global growth of a circular economy.
Yes, which is very interesting, because we will talk shortly about the circular economy in specific. But let's speak a little bit more about sustainable development from a perspective of its definition or terminology. Sustainable development or sustainability is a terminology that is very popular nowadays, but to the average citizen in Egypt, they don't understand why it is important and what does that mean and how would it benefit them individually. Maybe you can help explain that.
Sure. The word sustainability means continuity with on self-reliance of your inputs and your potential economic size overall. So the more you rely on the current situations in terms of employment, in terms of outputs, which is the gross national product, and rely less on importing, you rely more on the ability of this economy to grow by itself and export. That's by itself sustainability. So there are a couple of domains which leads to sustainability. First of all is the growth of the economy itself. So that's why we were looking before the pandemic on a good high employment level compared to other developing countries. Second is to control the cost. So that's why you have the subsidies being eliminated. You have the taxes being levied, which is properly now, because you are 100 million, and there is a lot of people who are under the poverty line. So somebody else has to take care of spending on them, not the government. To get rid of these public sector companies that are not profitable, and that is a part of reducing the cost. In addition to growing the economy, plus you control your waste management, whether it is in employment on labor that you're using or in terms of the output and inputs. So this is what we call,
so there's
in a nutshell,
proper hierarchy of an administrative hierarchy that was not very popular in Egypt or very acquainted, and now that this is in fact happening or taking place, it's putting everything in its right context.
Exactly, and that's why the planning, the long term of 2030 is called the sustainable development, which means there is development, because you can have still development, but sustainability is the word added since the start of this 2030 Sustainable Development Plan. So I think this is what I really appreciate in the government, that they are holding firm behind this issue of sustainability. They are adapting and that's the agility of the economy, adapting to get reactive in terms of the pandemics and the side effects that's going on the pandemic.
You mentioned also the circular economy,
Yes.
and that is another terminology maybe new to many people, but
Yes.
of course as a person who's very well informed with all the business and economic perspective,
Yep.
maybe you can explain to us what a circular economy is, and it's been ongoing to the rest of the world, so
Yes,
it's not something new.
Yes.
Maybe you can help also let us know what this is about.
Traditionally, on any economy, you have the production, so that you have the inputs, and then you have the output. And part of the output, a lot of it is waste. So in this case, your efficiency of your economic development is a bit controlled by the size of the waste that is generated when you are producing and when the economy is growing. So when we say circular, it means it's a loop that continues by itself. It means that before we get out the outputs or the production, we are controlling the level of waste, meaning that we recycle things, and instead of importing new inputs that goes into our economy, the recycling part helps to diminish a little bit the relying on new inputs. So when you have this issue of circular, it means that it's a continuous loop. But traditionally, there was no loop, because there is the
Yes, it was
inputs
a
coming,
straight line,
productions,
yes,
and then
yes.
it goes out.
But what are the benefits and or the pros and cons to it? Because I believe that this, although seems very systemized and organized, yet very costly and needs a lot of technology
On
and
the short
training.
term, it's costly, but on the long term, it's profitable. Because when you talk about renewable energy, imagine how much you're paying for electricity, energy, or supported by the natural gas, or supported by gas in general. So sustainability, and God bestowed on us this kind of natural resources that we have to use. And bear in mind, the whole globe now is going in that direction. The global warming side, and you can see even the weather nowadays in Europe and even in Egypt here is unprecedented.
I mean, who said that? Yeah, who could have imagined that it's 28 degrees in winter in Feb? Yeah.
Exactly. So, we all boil it down to the issue of global warming, which means that the carbon, emissions has to be reduced, which is actually what France actually last year announced, that they have exceeded the target that they put for 2020.
But because it was because it locked down most of the year last year anyway, so maybe that
was another thing, by the way, when they talk about agility of the Egyptian economy. One part of it, because our trade balance was very favorable to our side, because first of all, we did not consume that much of energy because of the traffics and because of the working of our factories. And second, because the emission also went down.
The emissions went down.
Pollution emission went down.
Yeah, speaking of renewable energy, yesterday President Sisi had affirmed Egypt's keenness in attracting foreign direct investment, specifically in the field of renewable energy generation. How is that important, especially as you've said correctly, Egypt is blessed with so many natural resources, and definitely working on that is going to help achieve the targets and the goals of 2030, which is going for clean energy and renewable energy.
I think the president, the charisma of President Sisi is that he is like, I compare him to President Sadat to a great extent. That these two presidents has very long vision in terms of where they want this country to go. And so if you look around and you consider yourself part of a global economy, let's bear in mind our president was the head of the African Union for 1 year, which means that he is fully aware of the
capabilities of the continent also.
And how can Egypt help? And that's why the message that he gave to the new president, which is the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And if you look where Congo is situated, you can find exactly this next to Tanzania, next to Uganda, and it's next to the GERD, which is another issue of integration that the president is massaging himself through it in a peaceful way, in a very diplomatic way, without confrontation, without these rumors that were circulated, especially from former President of the United States, Trump, when he said that Egypt has the right to attack, when this is not the case. But political words are not reflecting the reality that the president is looking for integration. The president is looking at how can use the best resources of Egypt, and of course the best resources is the wind factor, the energy generation of electricity by solar and other means of global energy. Bear also in mind that in Egypt now, I think we are looking for something called the green economy, because the green economy means that you encourage the investments in renewable energy and this kind of economic products and factories that can help and improve the development of the green
I believe
economy.
that every project that is now being studied in the new and smart cities and the new urban areas, they have to be very environmentally friendly.
Because first of all, multinational firms, which are part of our foreign direct investment approach, the main target is actually to develop these factories, outlets for them so that they can export that. Because if you look at the growth rate, population growth rate of Europe and developed countries, they are not in the level that it gives these kind of economies the ability to attract more foreign direct investment.
Yes.
Maybe they have the know-how, the expertise, the creativity and the developments. But we have the size and we have the market and we have the potential.
And the diversity, as I said earlier, Egypt is very diversified, so you can always find something to invest in or some project that would fit.
But the question is,
sustainable development.
which of what you have
Fits
is
us.
in need,
yes, of
not
course.
only for the local economy, but also for exportations.
Let's talk more about how the economy has also became more strengthened with the fact that there's been merging between the public institutions and the private sector and partnerships on various levels that have helped make that sort of balance. And not only that, but we've seen the renovations that have been taking place in the public institutions in terms of the trained employment going to use of technology or going digital. That would also meet that big gap that has forever always been found here in Egypt. How do you evaluate that?
I look at it from different angles. Number one is, are we global or are we local? That's the first point that I think the government, I'm sure, asked themselves, along with the president also. Then the answer is no, we are not local. We are not just focusing on who we are focusing on where do we belong and how can we serve others among us, whether the small circle or the bigger circle. So if you look at that we're part of the global economy, then definitely you have to abide by the rules of playing in a global perspective. And so that's why you have to adapt yourself, i.e. that you should not be a centralized economy focusing only by the public sector or by the government control. So you need to diminish that kind of power, not to that extent that you lose control of the government and the economy, but you have to allow the private sector to contribute to the development of a certain economy, because that also encourages the foreign direct investment coming from abroad, because if they feel that you are in control as a government of your economy, then what is my role here? So the issue of letting the private sector and the civil society also to contribute in the development of an economy, it gives the chance and it gives the signal to externals and to other foreign companies that Egypt economy is ready to accept you and to welcome you as institutions. And so that's number one. The second is, by doing so, you get the blessing of the international institution, which supervise and monitor fiscal policies as well as monetary policy. And so if you have their blessing, then you open the door the gateway for lending and funding that is coming from outside. And once you have this and you have the lending and you have the credit rating of the
economic institutions
and other economic institutions, then I think your economy is ready for accepting foreign direct investment, and also it means that you'll have more employment on the local economy.
We're going to talk about employment and, as you've correctly said, contributing civil society to this development and how has that changed the face of civil society as well. But allow us first to go to the second report. In Egypt signs 2 protocols to localize and develop auto industry. We'll be right back.
Okay.
The Minister of Public Enterprises witnessed the signing of 2 cooperation protocols between Al Nasr Automotive Manufacturing Company and the Egyptian private sector companies aiming to localize and develop the automotive industry in the country. The first protocol is to develop an electric bus model. The second includes the work of a feasibility study with the aim of establishing a research and development center for batteries, control systems and electric propulsion for electric-powered cars. The protocols will pave the way for the establishment of the first Egyptian research and development center for the electric car industry. The signing of these 2 agreements is considered an ambitious step to deepen and localize the Egyptian automotive industry. Minister of Public Enterprises confirmed that this step reflects the state's keenness to maximize partnerships with the private sector, especially with regard to modern technology in light of the global trend and development in the field of electric car industry, with the aim of keeping pace with progress and increasing the percentage of the local component and localizing technology. Worth mentioning that this protocol is a step towards the production of Egyptian clean energy vehicles. The first stage is the production of buses running on natural gas, and the next one is buses powered by electricity. This step confirms the return of Al Nasr automotive industry, not only to produce an electric car, but also to produce an Egyptian car that is able to compete locally and internationally. The auto industry is witnessing a technological revolution, represented by self-driving cars, electric cars, and those connected to the internet. And this is reflected in the increase in the technological component represented in the electronics and software circles, which is a strong competitive advantage for Egyptian talents.
Welcome back again. You're still watching us here on The Daily Debate. I'm very much delighted to have joining me Dr. Ibrahim Hegazy, Professor of Business Administration. Thank you once again, Dr. Ibrahim. We will be talking about what was discussed in the report, but let's finish up the point that we have been discussing before that. The integration of civil society in the economic development of Egypt, why was that important, and what was that, how has that changed, again, the process?
The nucleus of civil society is the Egyptian person himself or herself, and that's why, you know, the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development have done this people report, a people plan, as they say, and basically it means the participation of every Egyptian within his governorate about what's going on in that governorate, so that he or she can have an idea what's going on. He can contribute even by helping, you know, the fulfillment and execution of this plan here. So I think this is a very good step because it talks about transparency. So people think that when we are taking taxes and we are looking why the taxes are being collected and where is it spent? Is it spent on covering the interest rate and debts of Egypt, or is it actually spent on my standard of living improvement? And so by doing this, and I was very delighted to see that it is on a mobile application where you just can click on the mobile application, you sign in as your name and then your ID number, and then you start to get the information about the governorate that you are in. So you choose on the map of Egypt the governorate and you click on that governorate, and then here you have all the programs and all the plans that are being in action in that year within that governorate.
That's very interesting. Whether
it is education, infrastructure, you know, developments of all the public infrastructure that is there in a given governorate within a given year. So here you have a lot of benefits. You have the issue of the planning and performance in terms of judging a government, not by the amount of money they spend, but the amount of programs they have.
And also awareness is very important, so that you'd be aware. Awareness also
awareness,
is, yes.
Awareness about the sustainability goals of the 2030 plan. And part of it is the standard of living. So it's very, you know, interrelated. So having the person participate and civil society to participate, whether at the individual level or at a group level, it means that these are not for-profit organizations, but they are looking for much more noble objectives and targets from their inclusion in the development.
Definitely.
And so there will be definitely, if you have a digital and you have communication, then definitely you are ready for feedback. You are ready for the two-way communication between you and the Egyptian citizen in Egypt.
Of course.
I think this is very, very good issue of Egypt is adapting itself to the global trends.
Of course. Now, going back again to the automotive, Al Nasr Automotive Manufacturing Company, two protocols have been signed earlier between Al Nasr Automotive Manufacturing Company and the Egyptian private sector companies to localize and develop auto industry in Egypt. And I believe in the break we were also talking about how this is going to be very important. It's going to be the first 100% Egyptian-made electric car. Let's talk more about this project and how beneficial would it be.
Well, I have to tell you, Yasmina, I was honored to be part of the two group which were in as a board of directors to negotiate, the agreement and the long-term contracting with the third largest Chinese manufacturer of electric cars on Earth. And so through negotiation, the mandate for the board of directors of this company at that time, that was a year ago, the mandate was that we want to produce the first electric car, and it's part of the green economy. It's part also of our objective to go more long-term and to penetrate the regional area with exporting on behalf of the Chinese and Egypt, this electric car. So it helps so many things, replacements of the current cars that are being energized by gas, and to move into the green economy and the renewable energy by relying on electricity. And bear in mind, it has a lot of factors of value to Egypt here. Economically, you're adding more employment to a big company that was just being shut down for a number of years out of nowhere for no reason. But now I think the government with the minister, Mr. Hisham Tawfiq, the Minister of Public Enterprise, as well as, of course, the recommendation of the president in person that let's open up these closed companies and let's see how can we make the best use of it, because NASCO or NAS company was one of the largest in Egypt back in the 60s and the 70s, and up until the early 90s, when for one just reason, I'm not clear what the reason for it, it was just shut down for a number of years. So by going back, and if you visit this company and you see the manufacturing plants and you see the size of it and the location of it and how the old Egyptians, when they developed this in the 60s, they were so long-term oriented. They brought the best technology from Germany and Italy. So that now is being activated again. The Chinese, when they came, they were very impressed by the structure, by the size, by definitely there is a sort of renovation that has to be taking place, and which is actually taking place. But at the end of the day, what do you want out of this? Number one, you want employment.
To revive it again, to make it work.
Number two, we want the name to go back. Number three, you want to have the first car, not just a car, because you cannot compete anymore with traditional cars. You have private sector who is dominating.
Yes.
And the investment on electric car is a bit expensive. So we need somebody strong like a government. And the other company also is backed by the government, the Chinese government. So when you have this kind of alliance between two, developing tigers like Egypt and China, and you look around and there are no competitors who are actually producing these kind of electric cars in the region or even on Africa. I think the plan is not just to serve the economy, and that definitely helps on our image also globally, that we are moving not to produce by the government a local, not a regular car, traditional car, but we're moving in that direction of having an electric car. And I think you were asking me during the break, when was it going to be?
When is it going to be, and the costs and all that?
Exactly.
Yes.
It will be sold, I think, by the end of 2022.
That's very soon.
Yeah.
And you said that they're just working out on the process of how to recharge it, and then the barrier or the challenge remains that the battery, but then they have enough time to decide how's that going to be changed or repurchased. When he made this visit to one of the trade fairs, the last trade fairs, he was really pinpointing to this. We need to invest on how can we produce even the electric battery, because the whole component is in the battery itself.
Yes.
Now, the president always states that the government is willing, Dr. Ibrahim, to provide all the possible incentives for the Egyptian manufacturers to support the industrial sector. And as we've seen, that took place in Al Nasser Automotive Company, but there's tens of other companies that were very active. They were exporting their products and services to Africa and to Europe at some point, and had, for no reasons out of the blue, shut down. Pumping these manufacturers' industry back again. What kind of strategy do you think the president is aiming for in this regard?
Employment. In a nutshell, I think his main concern now is how can I get
more people employed,
more people working, how can I get them more enthusiastic about improving their standard of living. I think his also vision is for Egyptians to stand on themselves, not to rely on governments to help them. Definitely the infrastructure is there, so he's giving all needed support not directly on a person-to-person, away from the subsidy, the cash subsidy. I think that they're working on it now to try to make the shift from, in-kind subsidies to cash subsidies. But otherwise, anything else should be borne by the citizen. And so the citizen, now you have to find, not, as I say, the soldiers, because usually in any economy of soldiers, and they're the officers. So we have a lot of soldiers who work on the multinational level, but how about those soldiers who need to work on a blue-collar level, not on a white-collar level? I think this is the directions of the president, and of course it will have an impact on the GMP, because we were among the top before the pandemic. In pandemic, it affected us like anybody else. You cannot blame the government of this kind of slow. But bear in mind, when I'm reading the reports about the post-pandemic, we have great opportunities for Egypt to go on that direction, because it is the process of recovery, which means that the prices of oil will go up again. And in fact, yesterday, the barrel of oil for the first time, it went above the $60 rate. And that for us means that if your economies globally will start to be reactivated again after the pandemic, it means that you need natural gas, so you need gas as well, or oil, and that will help us to be part of active part in the global economy.
Now, let's also talk more about the Egyptian plans to increase their exports, because again, not only do you want to attract foreign investors to come and invest in the new Egypt, but you also want to go global. You're playing a very important active role in the African continent, and I think this is also a gateway to the rest of the world with all the resources in Africa and the very strong strengthened ties and relations between Egypt and the rest of the African nation. How is that also in the form of a strategy towards achieving the Sustainable Development Program of 2030?
We have to look at that President Sisi is the first president of Egypt who turned his head from up north to down south, meaning that he has a golden opportunity with the sub-Saharan Africa. And I think in his message to the new president of the African Union, he talked about something that
was during the opening session last week.
Days ago. In between the line, you can read that he's giving his technical support, which means that we are ready to export our technical support in terms of dealing with the coronavirus, for instance. Technical support in terms of the infrastructure. And he talked about the highways and the big mega project that Egypt did. So we have a know-how now that we can export. I think he's going in a very good way of relying not on exporting raw materials, but in exporting the expertise of our human power, human resource power, the human being himself, the ability of that human being to serve others. We have a successful record of, hepatitis C, and so that could be exported. We have a successful record in terms of, to a great extent, on dealing with the coronavirus. At least with all the opening and no shutdowns. Maybe the numbers officially are small, but even the government admit that, and the advisor of the president, Dr. Taguddin, he talked about don't rely on the numbers, because you have to look at the self-distances and all the hygienic conditions and rules for controlling the pandemic. And I think with all that we see around us, we have also an expertise to generate.
And a culture as well, which was very important to happen. Yes, very resistant to
And I want just to add
culture.
this one, the private sector. I know all of my colleagues who are owners of businesses, they have just now turned their head also to Africa. So we have a lot of investments, believe it or not, whether by the government, in terms even on Uganda, on many mega projects there with the Arab contractors, and also from the private sector. So I think this is a good vision to look at what do we need to export.
Well, because we got just a couple of minutes before we end, and we still have a lot of things we haven't discussed, but of course the Egyptian economy is always surprising us, and the mega projects that are always being inaugurated. So we'll always have better opportunities hopefully next time. But how do you view the future of the Egyptian economy, and can we get the economy growing a lot more faster than we're doing now? What do you suggest needs to be done?
Yeah. If I have a clear-cut answer, then...
well, you've got like 2-3 minutes to do that.
I'll have the Nobel Prize. No, I mean, how to get the economy in a better shape is to loosen up a little bit with the Egyptian in terms of giving more employment opportunity, I think it's also about making sure that when you are doing economic reforms, this should not be at the expense of the social justice that is taking place. And so we have to realize, you know, the distribution of our population statistics. We have a lot of young people who are below the age of 30 years, which is considered 6%. And on the other extreme, we have a lot of old people who rely on pension funds.
Of course.
So to grow in a nice, harmonic way, with the minimum impact, I think you have to work with the youth. You have to see how can you educate the youth, how to find them opportunities, how to encourage entrepreneurs and start-up businesses, and at the same time, without neglecting how you fund them. And in parallel, in conjunction, you have to protect those needy
Elderly,
people
yes.
who cannot really work, not because they have no ability, but because they are old enough to have to say to our economy and to our government, it's time for me to retire. I think this is one. The other thing also is to give more freedom for joint venture between the government and the private sector. Most of the joint venturing now that is taking place on the global or mega, I'm sorry, not global, mega projects. And most of them basically are in the infrastructure of construction and the building of highways.
So you would request they would expand further to other industries
exactly,
and businesses
and not to focus only on
the mega projects.
On a couple of ones that are known and is doing well. I'm not denying the fact. But let's move to more consumer-related, projects.
Yes.
I think this will also help easing up the tension that may arise between the government and the private sector.
Okay. Dr. Ibrahim Hegazy, Professor of Business Administration, thank you very much for joining me on the Daily Debate.
Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our episode of the Daily Debate for this evening, and we apologize for the technical error that took place earlier during our first report. I'm Yasmin Bakir signing off. Thank you for watching.